302 according to.
Oh, mine is
302.
exactly.
That one's right, that one's not right.
Weird, yeah. I'm sure people just say mine is 3.
Okay, let's get started then. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the September 16th Health and Housing Task Force meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Nunavut First Nation. And today's meeting of the Health and Housing Task Force will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018 number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192, governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding mass gathering events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. With that, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we have introduction of late items. We have a few. Want me to read them out?
Sure.
Oh, okay, I'll try. Correct me if I'm wrong. We have our presentation by Sydney Man Executive Director number 5A is being removed. We're adding in Sheila Malcolmson as presentation for 5A, and in addition to that, we're adding in 5B, which is a presentation of Dr. Alina Turner, updates and transition planning, and we were replacing 7A with this document, a new draft integration coordinated access technician position. Wow. That's why they paid the big bucks. So, I'm looking for an adoption of the agenda. So moved by Councillor Hemmons, seconded by, thank you, Signe. And all those in favor say aye or raise your hands. Any opposed? Hearing none, that's passed. We have adoption of the minutes from the Health and Housing Task Force meeting of September 2nd. Moved by Councillor Hemmons, seconded by, thanks John. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Yeah, that's passed as well. And we're on to 5A, which is a presentation by Sheila Malcolmson, who's going to give us a quick update, 3 minutes, on some things happening from the province. Maybe.
She's muted. You mute Sheila to unmute. Or I can.
There you go.
Hi friends, thanks for the opportunity. Just going to do a super fast rundown because things seem to be moving quickly. The pandemic response has been able to accelerate a lot of the long-term commitments that partly came from Minister Selina Robinson in housing, but I think particularly for some of our interests, joint interests in the mental health and addiction. So just this morning, our expansion of the Safe Supply prescription alternative was ordered by Dr. Bonnie Henry. In March, you'll remember that it became possible to prescribe Safe Supply, but you had to be both COVID vulnerable and overdose risk. As of today, the criteria has narrowed to only overdose risk, and the prescribers have expanded to include RNs and psychiatric nurses. I'll maybe send to Dawn and Erin's attention the link to the press release, but this is certainly going to expand broadly the alternative to the supply that has become even more poisoned as a result of the border closing. Anybody that doesn't have access to a community care team or a doctor or nurse practitioner, contact 811 and you can get connected with the prescription process. If you know anybody that could be a prescriber that needs support, that's also available to them. That's been a big initiative to get them trained up. Yesterday we learned that we were the successful Vancouver Island pilot project for a homelessness navigation center, up to 60 beds. The city and I pushed hard for that, and that, as we all know in our areas of work, just pointing people both to the right resources, but also having a stabilizing stay where people can get ready to be good tenants and more easily housed. Congrats to the city for winning for that successful bid. the situation table, which I think is also going to help a lot of the partners around the table. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to talk in more detail about this at a future meeting, but just to flag that also feels like something that is moving ahead that can break down the silos between the different social service agencies, and particularly take the load off police and get people that are interacting with police and other agencies that actually need access to social services that may lighten everybody's load and get people the help they need. And then finally, if you're a member of the coalition, then you've already got my list, but just a reminder that there are 3 granting opportunities open right now through Minister Darcy's office. One is to support operators of existing bed-based treatment and recovery services that were challenged by COVID-19. That deadline closes September 18th. Yeah, just 2 days away. Also funds for new treatment beds, 50 to 70 new publicly funded treatment beds. That is open right now. I think the closing is a little bit later again. And then the third funding stream is for 123 new beds for youth, aged 15 to 24, for substance use treatment and withdrawal management. That's a $36 million fund. Maybe again, I'll send this list to Dawn and Aaron, and we can distribute it to task force members if you agree that that's helpful. Thank you, all of you, for the work that you're doing, and just want you to know that there is, we are trying to bring some resources to take the pressure off you, or at least better support your vital work on the front line. Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions of Sheila they'd like to ask? I don't see anything. I would offer my thank you to the province for accepting Nanaimo as a navigation center. I think it's going to go a long way to helping things along here. It won't be without hiccups along the way, but we're quite willing to work through those so that we can be a shining example for the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
That's why they call it a pilot project, right?
Yep.
And so it's the second in British Columbia and the first on Vancouver Island.
The other one, who's the other site?
The one that was already announced is in Vancouver.
Vancouver. Wow, so Vancouver and Nanaimo, that's it.
That's right. Yeah, this is just a second. So we'll generate some results, and then that will inform next steps for other communities.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Next, we have Dr. A up. She's going to make a presentation on the last little bit, updates and transition planning. And it's my understanding at the end of that, Kim might have something you'd like to, motion like to bring forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not going to be the one doing the motion, but I'll set it up. So a couple of things I wanted to give everybody an update on. So the validation labs that are happening right now, so just want to give you an overview of where things are at in the community engagement process around the emerging themes that we discussed at the last meeting. Governance and implementation, that's the big thing that we need to chat about today, and that's what the motion will refer to. I also wanted to bring a couple of information pieces that emerged during the working group session around costs of various implementation options when it comes to the actual coordination of the proposed governance model. So they're not necessarily exactly what the path that you might end up on. It's more to inform your thinking in this and have additional insights as you prepare for a decision. So with that, I'll give you the overview around community engagement. So as you can see here, and a reminder for those of you that don't recall, we had a number of community-based sessions that are still occurring through September. They started in late August, so anything green's already done, anything yellow is underway, anything gray is we have facilitators for and are just being scheduled, so they're also underway. Anything red, we're needing to recruit some additional facilitators for because of various timing and scheduling pieces. So, well underway. We, as you can see, lots happening out there. There's two sessions where we also need some thoughts from you, and I'll bring this back after the governance discussion because I think it fits quite nicely after that. So in terms of feedback so far, I've read a couple of the lived experience ones, and folks that participated did not like our ocean metaphor. So in our efforts to be creative, we heard like just call things what they are. Don't get too fancy about things and keep it very simple. So I mean, obviously lots of other feedback, but I'm going to reserve the feedback when we get it all in so that you can hear it all in one shot. So I thought that was a funny thing to bring back for today. All right, so setting the context around governance. Reminder that last time we went through the strategic direction, the draft, of course, and then we had the overarching commitments around truth and reconciliation and challenging discrimination and stigma, and specifically around the ecosystem coordination component. There's the governance implications there, so I just wanted to kind of frame where this is couched within the proposed strategy. The components that Sheila mentioned, I loved that we already have some movement on this stuff because it fits around just the complex needs capability, as well as actually it's all complex needs capability, situation table, as well as the navigation center fit there as well. Okay, so on this piece around truth and reconciliation, I promised last time that we would have a touch base because we never got to finish this discussion last time. So there's a number of tailored recommendations around anti-colonialism and anti-discrimination being embedded throughout the activities proposed. So wanted to bring this forward to ensure that we had the opportunity to at least see some of these. So they are in your package. I'm happy to give this due process, but I also know that we don't have the representation on today's meeting, so perhaps I think it would be proper to defer.
Actually, Dr. Turner, we do. Emmy Manson just popped in here. Hello, Emmy.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. I didn't want to have the conversation without. So, okay. So on this piece, these are the emerging recommendations that we've put through, or we're putting through the community process. So one thing to note is that we might not end up with these just because they're the draft ones we're starting with. So we looked at what other communities that are working through an Indigenous informed approach are considering in their strategies, and then we looked at what has come up already in dialogues and in the early design labs. However, that doesn't mean that this is going to be what the engagement with the nation is going to kind of bring forward. So, I'll take you through these with the caveat that, again, we're going to need to hear from the community on whether these make sense from their perspective, but it's something to start the conversation. So the first one is the education and awareness around colonialism and the connection of colonialism to what we see in terms of inequities when it comes to Indigenous people. So that I know that seems obvious to some. It's actually not often stated in these strategies. We become silent on it, and therefore perpetuate some of the stigma. So that's some of the commitments that have been suggested. The TRC call to action, that being embedded in the decision-making around the plan's implementation. So having that lens in terms of TRC's call to action when it comes to the rollout and ensuring that that link is, is this advancing X call to action or not. So that lens has been proposed as well in other First Nations plans or collaborative plans between First Nations and mainstream or public systems. So support the local capacity for Indigenous-led housing and social support services, partnership with First Nation, obviously. You're going to need to tell us if this makes sense. It's even using words like sovereignty and autonomy. How can we support First Nations autonomy and by Indigenous for Indigenous is what it's trying to get at. There's this concept of an Indigenous cultural and healing center, and I know that that's happening in some communities. And is there opportunities to do more or expand on that as part of this work as well, particularly around urban Indigenous people as well. So the other one is, again, pending what we hear from the engagement. Another idea was to develop cultural and healing practices across services and housing programs. So how can we do better, given that the majority of funding is going into non-Indigenous organizations? Is there opportunities where we can enhance the competency of those services to support Indigenous people while enhancing the capacity of and supporting increased funding to Indigenous-led services? So that's some of the work there around training, supporting Indigenous self-determination on funding decisions. So again, having that lens around funding as well, because a lot of the funding is like I said, decisions that are made about Indigenous people's future that doesn't include Indigenous people. The other piece, again, Indigenous representation, and we threw out a 30% benchmark around governance and coordination tables, so that it's more than just one person at these tables. Integrated coordinated access, having Indigenous access points, and again, whether it's going to work in Nanaimo or not, but even what we hear in our work in other communities with Indigenous, with First Nations and Indigenous organizations, is that coordinated access sites are racialized themselves and are not friendly, not friendly, but like in some cases even racist to Indigenous people. So we want to make sure that those access sites that we choose are ones that make sense and are wanted by Indigenous people as well, given the overrepresentation component. Programming to address intergenerational trauma, and that fits in with our prevention agenda that we talked about last time as well, and the anti-poverty recommendations. So intergenerational trauma has a very different aspect when it comes to Indigenous communities, but it's certainly something that other communities that is not only Indigenous people, but it's in Canada definitely got that additional priority for us. And then the pieces that we were already starting to hear about, educating and encouraging landlords to rent to Indigenous people and support practices that are anti-racist. So lots of the lived experience folks that we're engaging with right now are talking about this. They're also interestingly talking about it in relation to housing providers, that they're experiencing racism in the current support services as well. So that's certainly something that we need to do better on all around. So I'll pause here and see if there's thoughts, questions, and
Emmy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think for me, I like this commitment one. I think that one of the things that we're trying to do in the Nanaimo region is really get Nanaimo at the table around decision making, but also around the distinct culture and ways that we have. We recognize we have visitors here, but we also recognize that I like that you have the number 4. We are trying to work with BC Housing for our own social housing on reserve, and that's been one of our challenges around the capacity, but it's also around the opportunity. And I think sometimes that's the word that we get in our communities, like, you guys lack capacity, you lack capacity. It's actually we lack the opportunity. And so I think for me, I would like you to add support local capacity and encourage opportunities, because it's one thing to keep saying we don't have capacity, but we've never been offered the opportunity to run any social housing like this in our community.
That's bang on, hey? Yeah.
I know, I'm so smart, right? So I think that one of the things that I wanted to is, like, sometimes we do a pan-Indigenous thing, culture and language, and respecting that we're in Nanaimo, but if you do anything around specific culture, the foundation needs to be of whose land this is traditionally on. And so, not saying that it would be Nanaimo, so I would like for the potential of a Nanaimo Indigenous culture that embraces other Indigenous identities of the region. Because if we don't put that, we lose the opportunity to support our own community, uplift our culture, but also do cultural safety and teaching. And some of our culture is similar to other Indigenous cultures, but we struggle, working with other Indigenous organizations because they want to make it a pan-Indigenous. And I guess for me, I like number 4 and I like number 5 especially, because the only way through the darkness is through healing. But I want it to be grounded in some kind of lens that's the name look. And I actually think a lot of these are really cool because I haven't seen a lot of actionable items from the TRC. And I went to a meeting last night about racism in Nanaimo, and I thought, like, the TRC was a total missed opportunity, but it's just like an event that happens, and I think that we have some work to do in our region to really uplift those things that are happening, and that we have a big role to play in all of these.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So,
I like them, so thank you.
Good.
I made it just in time.
Good. Yeah, it's like it was meant to be, or I would have had to defer it. Okay, that's good. Let's see. Grounded approach respecting that Nanaimo First Nation is the traditional, are the traditional. Anyway, we can play with that. Okay, and upon which chapters we can play with this. Okay.
And Alina,
Great.
I noticed in the comments section, Emmy, you put something in the comments section for what was number 4 to add in some text there.
Oh, she wanted to be SFN led.
Okay, so that was your new number 5, I think.
Yeah. Sorry. Are you guys seeing my screen?
All of it.
Okay. Good. Okay, so you're saying to put it in here.
I think it was number 4.
It was number 4.
It's number 4 in that I believe Emmy just wanted that number 4 be SFN led.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Oh, I see. Okay. Got it. Sorry, y'all. That's even better that you want to lead it. Okay. Okay. Good. Okay, we will make it pretty after the fact when it's done. Okay. The other one, and it's obviously very much related. So again, lived experience piece. People are really, from the lived experiences, are talking about the discrimination that they're facing from different angles. Some are talking about it from I'm being discriminated against or there's assumptions being made about me because of my mental health or my substance use. The conflation of poverty with crime and safety. We talk about that quite a bit as well. And then there's the layers of racism and discrimination on top of it. So there's been but quite a lot of comments from people with lived experience around wanting more community engagement and public education efforts to unstigmatize or destigmatize mental health and substance use, and then to challenge the discriminatory practices, racism, call out racism, microaggressions, which sounds like some of you are already well familiar with. So making the link between the strategy and that work around diversity, equity, inclusion, sovereignty would be another priority. And again, the trauma-informed, culturally appropriate engagement. We talked about it in relation to Indigenous people, but there's lots of diversity in the groups that we're talking about. So those layers need to be embedded in the process as well. That's why these are kind of commitments rather than specific strategies, because it's layers that should be visible throughout. So, any questions about this part? No.
Do we have any questions, anyone?
No.
I can't see anybody that much, so I'll just assume you'll talk if you need it.
All right. If anything else comes up, let me know. All right. So then we're on to governance, and I will make my screen bigger since probably not going to take as many notes. So what's your role? Who needs to be involved? So keep this in mind because we've been chatting around this for quite a while. You'll remember from our last meeting, and for those that weren't here, we talked about last time we went through all the different kind of emerging strategies being validated in the community. One of them is this concept of what's going to happen once the plan is done next month, right? So you're gonna have a plan, you're gonna present it to council, everybody's gonna get a pat on the back, and then you'll be, then you go back to your other jobs. So we wanted to start beginning that transition process and start talking about what a new governance model might look like after this is all done. So we talked about a 2.0 of the task force, or perhaps a completely different governance group, but having some kind of a stewardship group that's going to be a council of champions, if you will, that will be able to provide that strategic oversight for the plan. Obviously, there's certain groups that need to be represented, so the business sector, Indigenous representatives, again, so we'll talk about urban and First Nations, talk about school districts, service providers, people with lived experience, and that's there's probably a bunch more that are needed here. The concept of this is that it would be almost like a board of directors, if you will. So it's decision makers, people that can make or break things versus folks that are operationally involved in the delivery of the plan. We've got lots of great vehicles to do operational work, so we need that strategic oversight at this level as well. And then we talked about the need, of a systems planner organization. So somebody whose job it is to facilitate, convene, coordinate so that the plan gets implemented, and all of these great ideas that the community is really engaging with right now are actually going to come to fruition. And that's the other thing I'm reading through the notes from the sessions is people are really skeptical that anything is going to come of this exercise. So I think it behooves us all to set it up for implementation and set up for action as a result of our work together and the commitment that everyone has made around the table to do this work. So the system planner organization will have some critical roles to play. They're by no means going to do this on their own. Their job is to, like I said, get everybody on board, keep the trains moving on time, and make sure that everybody's collaborative and doing their part. But ultimately, everybody will have a role to play in something transformational like this. So there's some things that are pretty consistent with other organizations that fulfill this role. So there's lots that they can do around research and development, capacity building, data information management, convening stakeholders, and coordinating services, coordinating stakeholders as well, and ultimately being that point quarterback for your community to make this happen. So as a result of the work with the working group, we talked at further length about whether the Health and Housing Task Force could be reviewed, revived 2.0, if you will, to become that oversight group working with the system planner organization to roll this out. If so, it couldn't just be a committee of council. It would need to have a broader role, and then the stakeholders around the table, we need to make sure that the right decision maker level, so that they can act as champions beyond the development of a plan, but into the implementation. So there might be some additional work that we need to do if we do go in this direction. And the systems planner organization, we talked about this further as well. We said how it needs to be a Nanaimo-focused entity. We need to put Nanaimo first in terms of local needs as opposed to provincial priorities. So there was a recognition that it needs to be embedded in the local fabric, and it has the ability to pull these diverse stakeholders together, and not the usual suspects either. So, how are we engaging with the business community and folks that may not be around the table right now? It needs to have the ability to access resources and influence change in an effective manner versus talking about it. And then we also talked about this as something that's benefiting the entire community, so it's not something that just one party benefits from. It needs to be working for diverse stakeholders as well. So from there, we undertook a really interesting exercise, or at least I did it by myself, but we talked about the key responsibilities of what it would essentially do in its day-to-day. And then we thought about, can you do it? Do you want to do it? Do you have capacity to do it? And we thought about it from the various contenders that we have in similar functions, if you will, or some variations thereof. So we thought about, there's the Nanaimo Homelessness Coalition, we have the United Way, we have the City of Nanaimo, we have BC Housing, we have Island Health, and the question becomes, and this is why I said I would come back to the decision maker, the funders lab, etc., because we have to find ways to have these conversations around roles and responsibilities in terms of plan implementation. One of the roles and responsibilities is the systems planning function that we're talking about, but we, as consultants, we're in no position to tell any organization what they should and shouldn't be doing. Obviously, that's something that needs to be considered very carefully internally. It may be a complete non-starter with some of the parties up here, and that's also okay. It's just a point to say that the first step is to look within the community to see if there's something that could be a contender for this role, where the task force feels that it would do a good job supporting the implementation of this plan. And if there isn't, then are there options where we could ramp up a different entity that might exist already but needs additional capacity and oomph to get things going. So in this exercise, of course, we need to bring this to all of you for consideration as well, and get advice from especially the parties named up here. You know, is this something that is of interest? And then the key questions, if you want to do you have capacity to do it? The working group in our internal exercise kind of came up with the idea that really it needs to be an arm's length that can build on something that might already exist, but none of the organizations that are currently listed do all of what we talked about when it comes to health and housing. So while BC Housing might have a mandate around housing, Ellen House has a mandate around health, obviously, but what do we do around poverty or reconciliation or food security, all these other pieces that we talked about during this process. It's a pretty comprehensive plan. The only thing that it has in common is that it involves everyone. So we've leaned towards this option, which is why you're going to hear from members with further detail around this. So the other piece, and I'll shut up and hand it over to the folks on the working group for their motion, but we did do we did extensive due diligence to look at other alternative models, and we looked at Kelowna and their process and how they ended up with their arm's length entity. The only thing about that is that it's specifically focused around homelessness. Yes, there are some interesting approaches that might be useful to note and learning from them as well. So the startup ramp up and full rollout of the different activities that they undertook, the ability to ramp up quickly and not have this lagging time in startup has been kind of a challenge for Kelowna for sure, where they didn't have the startup. The startup didn't go as well as it could have because they had staffing changes during that time. So there's some pros and cons to all of this, and just because you go in one direction doesn't mean it's going to be smooth sailing, as John was mentioning. The challenges that can come up when you roll complex systems change out. So also wanted to touch on the various costs and how, at least in Kelowna, how they transitioned from the task force overseeing this process into this new model, and that there are ways that we can have a smooth transition so that we don't have a lag in implementation. That's why you're seeing things being brought forward already that are implementation related. So we're not waiting for this thing to ramp up while we are implementing actions that have been specified. So that's kind of my last piece to note. I wanted to kind of leave you as you think about the motion that's being brought forward, how we want to, or where we want to go moving forward in terms of our conversations with key decision makers, especially the statutory entities and government philanthropy that we need to engage. Why we need to do that is we need to also validate all of our recommendations and their role and buy-in in terms of implementation, because obviously we're not going to be successful without them. There are some high leverage actions that are already coming to fruition. So the governance, the system plan organization, the coordinated access, funders table, the action, this is the thing that these intervention teams, and now we've got this opportunity around the wraparound support that Sheila mentioned especially when it comes to addictions and mental health and navigation center. So there's some high leverage actions that are already emerging. So it's going to be really, really important to have these conversations now. So it's, do we go one-on-ones? Do we have design labs with them? Again, I'm not going to, I'll let the folks from the team bring forward the motion, and then we can come back to this as considerations in terms of next steps. Okay, over to the motion.
Great. Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Smythe, did you want to bring forward your motion?
Yes, thanks very much, and thank you, Dr. Turner. That was fantastic. I'd like to put a motion on the table, look for a seconder, that the City of Nanaimo collaboratively through the Health and Housing Task Force and the Economic Development Task Force explore an arm's-length organization that includes both economic development activities and social development planning coordination.
We have a seconder? I have a seconder from Signe. And John and Jason, but you have to talk first and then we'll vote, okay? So would you like to speak to it? It's your motion.
I'd like to leave time for others to speak as well, but a community's economic health and social health are intrinsically tied together. There's no two ways around it. Recognizing that and recognizing that we have invested a lot of time, money, energy, frustration and goodwill into the systems that we've been supporting in the past that hasn't brought us to any great place on the horizon. And perhaps taking a look and exploring, which is all the motion adds towards an exploration and a conversation around the possibilities here. And those of us who have spoken amongst each other about this have noted many, many high points and pretty exciting and I'd like to open the floor to any questions, if that's your role, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I was about to say that, yeah. So who would like to, would anybody like to comment or have questions? Signe, is that you? I see you shining there. Emmy? Yes.
I think it's Emmy.
Yeah. Just as soon as you unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't figure out how to mute myself, apparently. I need clarity about what the motion actually means. I haven't been part of development, but I actually read it so fast. So I asked for it to be in the chat, but I didn't see it. But can somebody, 411 it for me? What does that actually mean in action?
I will type if somebody else will talk, so that you all have that written out. Somebody want to take that up? Perhaps Signe?
Oh. Okay, so Kim, you're typing up the motion in the chat? Okay. And I'll just speak to what in favor of the motion. I think sitting on both the Mayor's Task Force and the Health and Housing Task Force, the conversations keep coming back to how do we take all of this great work that Alina's brought forward and we as a community have worked together on, and what role is the city going to play? How does moving the dial, moving this forward? How do we fund it? How do we align our funding under some kind of a structure? And so, what I'm hearing across both, we've got hundreds, thousands of donors to United Way, and as we're doing our virtual campaign, and we're launching a campaign formally this coming week, I'm talking to businesses and they're going, we have to, we're giving to the United Way and we also give to other charities in this community. We sit on the chamber board, we see these issues that's linked, right? How do we address social issues and economic development issues, particularly revitalizing downtown, truth and reconciliation, moving those pieces forward. So I'm just saying what I'm hearing from both my donors, from the business side that, care about social issues because they're giving to me and to other charities on the ground. They care both about economic development and social development. And they're looking for, they're waiting, I wouldn't to say bated breath, but they're saying, you know, we've worked on this for a long time on the Health and Housing Task Force. What are we moving forward? How are we moving forward? How are we funding this? And so this is a request from this task force to the city to look at setting up a standalone organization that will then address both economic and social development issues and not play one against the other.
There could be quite a few efficiencies between not starting two disparate organizations at the same time going in individual directions, but exploring the possibility of it being one organization with a board framework such that all issues can be brought to the table and more minds can work on solutions that impact both the future of our economy and our social health going forward. As an economic development arm of the city, it will continue to be difficult to attract people to consider Nanaimo as a new business location with some of the social problems that we have on our streets, with rising crime. Similarly, not just attracting new businesses to our town, but economic development is essentially a three-pronged fork. It's business retention, business enhancement, and business attraction or recruitment. So it's difficult to enhance business when we're faced with some of the problems that we are, and it's tough to retain businesses and retain business activity, especially as we're having this slow bounce out of COVID or back in and out, in and out. I think it's time that the Chamber thinks it's time that we sit down and address these issues together. I sit on both task forces. I sit on the Homeless Coalition. I'm on the board of the BC Chamber of Commerce. I'm a member of the Business Council of BC. All of these things, and we just got to find a way, I think, to try and make them come together. Use a broad, expansive minds to solve problems that have some commonality between them.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. I thank you for the clarity. I guess for me, one of my concerns is when we create all these other organizations, there's a cost to start up, right? And there's admin fees and there's all these other. And I guess one of the things I have seen at this task force is we all are busy people, and I admit I haven't been here as much as I want to be and when I'm not. But I think that I do want to see movement, I want to see action, and I think we got to find a way to lift it up. And so does this mean that the city provides financial support to set this up? Like, are they just looking to the options to write up what this could look like?
Well, I mean, I'm suggesting that if the city is, which it is, exploring the opportunities and the processes around establishing a new arm's length economic development organization, well, over here we're looking at setting up an arm's length social development organization. That maybe that should be one organization, so there's only one set of setup costs. There's shared administration. There's a number of shared opportunities for saving significant amounts of money instead of having two parallel organizations who should be thinking with at least half the same brain together. And it's located in the same space, then the conversation is one in a hallway. It doesn't have to be deliberately and you know, to see efficiencies in energy investment and in financial investment, and I think if we explore these together, explore the possibility of a formalized together organization going forward, that we start to see a lot of efficiencies. We may hit the big speed bump and go, oh, everything's great until we hit the speed bump, and then it's not working anymore. So at least we explored it, and at least we talked together, and maybe we build a greater bridge in the interim between economic development and social development planning.
Elena, you had your hand up, and then Jason.
Yeah, I think this is very cool. I've never seen it done before, which may or may not appeal to you. But what I do know as somebody who's worked in this area for a long time and as like a recovering Marxist, we know that there's such entwinement in that homelessness is a symptom of economic development done poorly. And so there's so much evidence to now, and now through big data that's showing us where we see population growth and GDP growth, which we all want. We all want that growth from a business perspective. That's also where we see the correlation with homelessness and other inequities emerge. And that's a Canada-wide challenge. So I think the fact that you're purposely putting them together with the spirit and the values and the principles that we talked about through this plan, that's a way of having sustainable, inclusive, equitable growth in Nanaimo that's ultimately going to benefit everyone. So I think it could be kind of a capitalism with a human face, if you will, done locally. And I think that's really, really exciting. And I really hope this does happen for you, because it could be something that could lead the way in other parts of the world as well. And I think it's very innovative, and congratulations on coming up with it, because that was a community idea. So that's it.
Jason?
Yeah, I just think we're at a moment where we have this great opportunity in front of us, and we do have to realize that they are sort of two sides of the same coin, and they are linked. They're linked together, whether we like it or not. And one of the things that I've been having lots of conversations with other business owners and executives in Nanaimo. There seems to be a broad support for doing something different, because the path that we've been on has led us to this point. And obviously, there's going to be asked of financial contributions, but I think it's from all different directions, and then it's building. It's from the coalition and reaching home funds. It's from the city. It will be from other places, and just as Lisa Murphy and Melina put in the chat there, it is that recognition that we are all in this together. And the thing that I like about this, because I think the thing that is missing for me and all of in what we've been doing, is we need a group that is focused. As Emmy said, often we're all doing this off the side of our desk and we're doing the best that we can. We need a group that's focused on using Signy's language, curating everything that we have in our community to create the community narrative that those that are in the positions to take our needs and our asks to Victoria, to Ottawa, on our behalf, are able to do so very confidently, because the community has been involved in creating that story. And it's not just the business story, it's not just the social story, it's all the things that we need so that we can really advocate. Often there will be broad things that come from the federal or provincial government, and we can then say, well, we need to focus on these specific pieces to address the needs in our community, which is the piece that we all experience similar things in communities across the country, across the world, really, but there has to be the local context to our place and time. And I think this is a really amazing opportunity to explore what that could look like, and to do something that can actually really change the community that we have. So I'm just really very much in support of this. I was already in support of a social kind of arm's length, but this opportunity that was presented, I think, is it should be a real game changer for our community, and can't wait to get into exploring it.
I have next John and Signy.
Just from my perspective, I think community on this committee is actually, it makes sense that we would evolve towards something in this nature. And I agree with Jason's point about the city's role to be a curating force. I would also just want to mention that I think Nanaimo is the right size kind of a community for this kind of work. We do know each other and we work very closely together, and I think that it's easier to do something like this maybe in a place like Nanaimo than it is in larger urban centers or places that are less connected to each other. And then the third piece of that for me is that and I mentioned this earlier today at the Nanaimo Homelessness Coalition, is that I worked in a municipality where there was a lot of community engagement in a very formal process, and that it was the nature of bringing community into the work around addressing community challenges that was really effective. We didn't offload it to the city. We had to do the work ourselves. So I think this is actually, from my perspective, a welcome thing that's happening, and the fact that we're putting the two pieces together, I think, is very strong from my perspective.
Thank you. Signe.
Yeah, I was just going to share that, United Way is working with VIU. VIU has always run a good campaign for United Way, and VIU President Deb's on the mayor's task force with me, and I just see there's, the conversations we're having with VIU about how do we drive more giving and have VIU more tied downtown and in the community, which is what Deb is talking about, and William Litchfield is looking at from his office. And I think there's a real opportunity to connect VIU into this as well as we go forward from a research side, as a place where we have a map and a strategy to then go after not just government funds, but private funds as well to fund solutions. And, so I think if we could get a plan and a place to drive, both working with Sheila and Paul, different levels of government, and really drive some of the truth and reconciliation pieces, as you're saying, Emmy, put some real action. Like, I think there's a way to connect a lot of the resources in the community into something around, a coherent plan. And, so I think it's catalyzing. I guess it's kind of a weird word, but you know what I'm trying to say, amplifying and connecting.
And Jason, you have your hand up again?
Yeah, just seeing some of the comments on the side there, I just wanted to bring forth that, just want to remind people that what has been brought forward is about an exploration. And we did have some of the discussion around health, addiction, all those other pieces. But what we wanted to try and do was put it into two places, because obviously economic development has many, many, many layers to what that can mean, just like the social side of it. And I think what we were hoping to do, because we know that exploration is going to get us deeper into the weeds. I agree with Lisa talking about having enough resources. There is a threshold of what we would need potentially going forward, but that's where the exploration part comes in, where we can have those proposals. I'll be honest about one of the things that was brought up for me from my side. I'm coming from the social sector, and the way that I approach things, as much as I am a pragmatist and I am, a fiscally conservative kind of person when it's that side of things, it's for social ends. One of my concerns, right off the hop of hearing economic development, well, are we going to deal with all of these issues in a disorder type manner? Because that's not the way we do our work. We do our work with people first. So for me, I even backed up and tried to back off of that to understand that what we're proposing is that we get into the exploration and that conversation. And I think anybody that is on the social side of this will have concerns and points that will need to be met to feel comfortable on how we could go forward with some sort of structure like that. Just like the economic side, there will be people that will have that same concern that, oh gosh, we're going to be just worrying about all this other stuff, giving things to people. So what I'm encouraging is all of these things are very valid. But what I'm hoping is through this proposal is that we will start getting to action-oriented meetings to talk about what this framework would look like, what a proposal would look like, what each group would need to have satisfied to go forward with something like this. So I think they're all valid, but I just want to remember that we will get into the weeds, but that might not be for today.
Lisa, your video's on. Would you wish to say something?
Yeah, I was just thinking a bit about what Jason was saying, and it's almost like we'd have to really name the guidelines we would work under and what we will do when, equal time to those different, sometimes divergent interests, and really approach from a place of curiosity, but still outline really crisply what the decision making is. Because I think, stating the obvious, I think if we knew the answer and how to do this, any one of our organizations, it would already be done. And I think as health, I'll just be transparent, I often feel like people look to us to solve the issues that no single probably group amongst us can solve. But together, if we really were committed to shared decision making, but the group has some authority, I think we could really have action.
Heidi, you're on the line. Thank you, Lisa, for those comments. I was wondering, Heidi, if I could ask you the question, do you see any issues with the motion as it sits? I mean, it's exploratory at this point, but say in the event that such an organization would be set up, how would BC Housing view it? I know I can't get you to speak for BC Housing, but I've been curious about what you think of the motion.
Well, I think it's an exciting motion and appreciate the opportunity to comment. I think the exploration of this, seeing what the synergies are, but also respecting, like Lisa said, each of the agencies and what their mandates are and balancing all that. But I think what I like about it's a community approach, it's a collaborative approach, because acknowledging that none of us can do our work on our own, bringing us together in a solution-focused kind of way will create success.
Okay, thanks for that. Do we have anybody else who wishes to comment? Yeah, Karen?
Sure. So thank you, Kim, for bringing this forward. I'm happy to support it for 3 reasons. The first is that it's exploratory, and Jason, I liked that you acknowledged that this won't be an easy process if we decide to go forward. But right now, we're simply exploring this idea. This isn't, we're not building anything at this point. And so I think, given that it's exploratory, that leads me into my next point for supporting that, because it's innovative. I think one of the things that this group was tasked with was looking at the issues we're facing in a different light, and we worked really hard to strategically put people at this table who were going to help us think about it differently, and so I think this is a testament to that. And also, third, and very practically, it aligns with other work going on in the city. I really appreciate that the Economic Development Task Force is already, a little bit ahead of this group in terms of looking at what it would look like to start an outside entity, and I like the alignment, because it's not just a funding, it's not just a financial piece, it's a capacity piece, it's people buying into the concept that this is a good way to do business. And I think, I won't belabor the point, economic development and homelessness and health and housing are so intertwined, and I think putting those, the people who have the power to make decisions under one roof is a really smart idea. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Sheila, you wanted to make a comment?
Thanks, Chair. I wanted to ask a question, actually, for inspiration. I'm curious whether an approach like this is partly what has got the City of Duncan ahead of some of the other island municipalities. My observation from afar is that they have been advocating for resources and pilot projects with one voice. And I wonder if Signe, in her broader geographic role than some of us have, if you might be able to confirm that, or maybe talk a little bit about what you saw from that side. Thanks.
Can I go ahead, Chair?
Sure.
Thanks, Sheila. Yeah, yes, I think, I mean, because we're in several communities up and down the island, it's been interesting to watch both pandemic response and, you know, obviously sitting on coalitions or staff of the island, you know, supporting coalitions, homeless coalitions. So we kind of watch what happens in the different communities, and definitely in the Cowichan Valley through the pandemic, it's really been a very different experience because both mayors, everybody, like all, Lisa, I mean, Island Health folks are there, Heidi, BC Housing, you know, your crew are there. We've got, you know, the main service providers, the funders, everybody came together and had a conversation and came up with a strategy and then did a pitch to the province. You know, and it was above and beyond what so many of the other communities in DC were able to achieve in that process. And, you know, I think what was interesting was, you know, 110 homeless people are now being supported with services and housing, you know, with tents and supports through the summer. Now we're working through a process to have more permanent and, you know, winter shelter. And I understand the funding now is through till December at least, and now we're working, obviously won't close your ears, those of you at the province, but we, you know, we will be pushing for and looking for funding through at least March 31st. So, you know, I think that what was incredible was, you know, weekly getting together, grouping Island Health, BC Housing, all of us who are funders, reaching home funds, my way dollars, and coming together with a curated solution, and then making that pitch to the province, which, you know, has fundamentally shifted. You know, we already have our by the name list of 110 people who are sleeping rough in that community. Like, you know, we've got funding for coordinated access down there, but we've got a real leg up just in terms of implementing coordinated access because of that communal, multi-agency, multi-municipality response to the pandemic. And so our challenge now is how do we move and you know, so I'm making lots of meetings down there at this time to figure out how do we take what we learned from this multi-agency response and shift it now more formally so that we can actually go after permanent, you know, get permanent housing built and more supports and move them out past the pandemic. But boy, it's been an incredible experience. You know, just watching everybody go, I can do this, I can do that. You know, Cowichan Tribes is there, you know, as is House of Friendship, you know, providing support. So it's been inspiring.
Thank you. All right, is there anybody else who wishes to make a comment here? If not, I will call the motion. All those in favor, raise your hands or say aye. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you much, everybody. That's great. Next. I don't even know where I am on the agenda here. Here we are. You know, we're in the reports. Very sorry.
I'm so excited.
Yes, I am. I was going to suggest that I'm voting in favor of this merely because Jason, when he first talked, reminded me of Ebenezer Scrooge the day after the three ghosts visit him and he's running around as giddy as a schoolgirl. So we're on to reports. The next is we're replacing the draft call for proposals for the coordinated access technician, and that's going to be introduced by Karen.
Thank you, Chair. So, and thanks to Ledge Services for distributing the new attachment. This draft call for proposals replaces the job description that you had attached to your original agenda for integrated coordinate access technician. And I'm actually going to ask Signe to speak to the funding for this position, just so we have some clarity on both the funding for this year and the funding that might be available in the next few years. You know, there was some interest in whether this would be a continuing project or just a one-time pilot. And Signe, I don't know if Kara, also from the United Way, who drafted this call for proposals, might be interested in speaking about the transition from having it as a job description to having it as a call for service. Give Signe a second to unmute.
Unmute, sorry, I'm yapping away. So this position is being funded through Reaching Home funds that we manage as the CE and the coalition. The wider coalition makes a decision about where the funds go. Just a reminder, I know everybody's heard this before, but we have 5 years of funding from Reaching Home. So after this fiscal year that ends March 31st, we've got another several years of funding, 2 more years after, probably 3 more years after that. So every year for the next 3.5 years, we have funding to implement, to develop and implement coordinated access. I mean the community of Nanaimo. And that's through our designated funding, that's Reaching Home federal funding that we receive. So part of our obligations are being the community, not our as United Way. So in receiving designated funding, we are obligated to develop and implement a coordinated access system. So I'm not going to cover that because Elaine has spoken extensively, as have others, about what a coordinated access system is. And so our challenge is every year, this year and the next 3 years, we've got funding we must spend. If we don't spend it, we will lose it at the end of that fiscal year. So we've been waiting through this process with Health and Housing Task Force in hopes pre-pandemic that we'd be finished that process last May and June. We'd be deciding how we were moving forward in aligning a coordinated access system. Obviously, BC Housing has its own version of a coordinated access with the many sites and agencies that it funds. So that exists already. So anyway, just the background piece is we've got several more years of funding for coordinated access, and but we have to spend this funding this year. And so the point is to do the contract and get somebody on board so that we can at least be starting that process, talking to, what's BC Housing doing, what's Island Health doing, what are all the service providers doing. I've already written into the COVID Reaching Home contracts that we've got that anybody's getting funding through either United Way dollars or Reaching Home dollars, that they have to participate and share, how many clients are you serving, who are those clients, not obviously identifying individuals. So we've been laying around the groundwork, trying to get ready to take the next step on coordinated access. And this is not a placeholder. It's really trying to move stuff forward until the House and Housing Task Force has made its final recommendations, and the City of Nanaimo accepts those and decides how it's going to move forward and fund its portion of driving solutions that have been identified through the House and Housing Task Force. Is that what you were looking for, Karen? Is there, I could get into dollar amounts, but I'm not sure that we can do that. But just know that on top of all of the other funds that the coalition invests through contracts with John Howard and other agencies on the ground, we also have funds to implement a coordinated access, implement and run. And it's got to be up and running within the next year and a half.
Thank you very much, Signe.
Okay.
Yes, Lisa.
So Signe, with this position, given that it could be a pilot for 1 year and then ongoing, is the idea that it could shift to another entity? So that's the idea, just to clarify.
I think that was the conversation that we had with the working group before the task and and also at the coalition level, is there's groundwork that needs to be done in terms of, I mean, Alina and her team through Health Secrets has done a lot in terms of mapping, you know, who's doing what, but I think there's a number of conversations that have to happen sooner rather than later, like, you know, how is what Violet is doing and BC Housing is funding going to connect with other services in the community, and how we, you know, we only have X number of spaces for clients to go into at this juncture. You know, what are the challenges now? How do we identify that? And yeah.
Lisa Murphy, you had some.
Yeah, just a quick question or does it, I get it why we like to do temporary positions, but I just would like to flag a concern around temporary positions as we are hiring between the new supported housing, our own growth within health, where our human resources are getting very limited, and what we note is if a position isn't permanent, we really limit the pool of people who are willing, and no one will move for a temporary. So just I get it why, just an observation.
Yeah, I just to respond to that, I totally agree, Lisa. I mean, that's our challenge. If I had my druthers, I'd just park the money as a funder and say, let's wait for this whole piece to move forward with Health and Housing Task Force, get this, you know, have whatever the city's going to, you know, role the city's going to play with all of us going forward, and then we align it. I think the challenge is, do we just lose that money this fiscal, or is there some pieces of the research and the conversations that we could hold? And I guess, I don't know, I think Alina had her hand up and I interrupted. Sorry, Kim.
No, not at all. No, I was just going to second you, Sydney, on it, and Lisa too, in thinking through this with the United Way team. We positioned the RFP as something that a service entity would take on. So rather than the United Way hiring a temporary position, it's the function as from a service delivery perspective would be in community, and from that sense, the United Way as a community entity has ongoing funding for it. So obviously there will be changes constantly happening in the community that will need to be accounted for from year to year, but I don't think the intent is to fund this for only 6 months. I think the United Way's intent is for this to be an ongoing investment in the system coordination role, but respecting that this is a service delivery aspect versus a system planning role. So I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that.
Lisa and then Aaron.
Just to speak.
Sorry, Jason, quiet. Oh, you got your mute off. Go for it.
I was just going to say, from the coalition perspective, because obviously the Reaching Home dollars flow through there, it is intended to be an ongoing scenario. I think part of the temporary nature of it is also related to we're not sure what the next steps are coming out of this scenario. So the focus very much is on process and relationship. And it is being, anybody that takes it on, it's being designed so it can be portable. So it can be handed off to another agency or another entity, and it's something that can be built upon, it can be iterative as more resources come online, and it's to be complementary, as Heidi put in the comments there. It is built or intended to be complementary to the other processes. It's a way to funnel the information around people into one place so that we can effectively match them with the right service, and especially as we grow. So whoever takes it on has to take it on with the understanding that there is a good chance that it will land with a different entity or a different scenario, but hopefully whoever would take on that job would also be able to maybe move with that. It might be, under a different banner, but I think that's the intention from the coalition.
Thank you. I think I have Lisa, Aaron, and then maybe Heidi.
I'm going to let I think Karen, you had a question?
No, I thought the transition from having to be a position to being a call for proposals was with that in mind, what Jason's talking about, the flexibility of it being possibly an agency that already exists that provides similar service delivery, being able to take that on, maybe not hire somebody new, but shift roles, be more fluid. And then I just wanted to acknowledge all what Tara's put into collating people's ideas and ambitions for this $50,000 into a fine call for proposals.
Erin?
A question for Heidi. I understand that HIFIS at some point might be available to use by local operators, and I'm curious if coordinated access is, if we're anticipating at some point a merge with HIFIS or a interoperability so we're not using two systems locally?
And thanks for the question, and our goal was it definitely continues to be to expand the use of HIFIS. It hasn't gone as quickly as we thought. We were working toward a pilot with the CRD in Victoria, and we're probably about 9 months behind. So, but we definitely want to be able to incorporate HIFIS and have that central data spot, and be able to have some good reporting as well for Nanaimo. So that would definitely be an essential piece. And if I might add, I did through the chat reinforce our support. We really do see this position as being complementary to the work we do, and really speaks to more of a systems approach. You know, at current BC Housing's CAA process is really exclusive to our supportive housing. In other communities, we've added the rent supplement because we see that as a very a positive, an opportunity to ensure positive flow. So, you know, just really want to emphasize our support. I know Lois is going to provide feedback on the document that was sent out, because she has some good learnings out of the RFP that was hosted in Victoria for a very similar role.
Thanks, Heidi.
Okay, I don't see any more speakers. Is this for information?
Yes.
Okay.
The next steps is going to the coalition after all the feedback submitted by this Friday. And I think there's a timeline on the last page.
Tara extended it to Friday.
Oh, right. Yeah. So
Okay.
Friday, and then hopefully issued in October.
At least before the 5th.
I think that's they may end up just adjusting these.
Okay. Next on our agenda is number B. It's Dave Stewart's going to be presenting the BC Housing Navigation Center.
Switch chairs here. So thanks. Things are moving fast, obviously, as we heard. So originally we had this on the agenda to let the task force know what the navigation center is all about. But thank you, Sheila Milkinson, for updating us on the very good news that Nanaimo has been selected for a navigation center. So next steps are going forward are working with BC Housing and selecting an operator on that site and looking for locations at that site. But just to go backwards maybe a little bit, for those that don't already know what a navigation center is, and I see Heidi's on that call, so she can hopefully chime in and correct me where I'm wrong or add on to anything I miss. But basically, this is a bridge to housing type model, or a shelter with 24/7 supports based on referrals, and we are in a good opportunity to use coordinated access. We've also heard from service providers already about some ideas for some of the other supports that could be there. Those conversations are ongoing. So we just basically wanted to bring this to the task force to update you on that and let you know those conversations are starting, and I'm sure many of the task force members will be involved in that. I know, Heidi, did you have anything else to add? Sorry.
Thanks, Dave. I can just add that we're looking at a timeline for the middle of October for the RFP for the operator. Vancouver has already issued their RFP, and I want to learn from the RFP process and be able to incorporate those learnings into the one for Nanaimo. things to hopefully be able to roll out to future navigation centers around the province.
May I ask a question? Heidi, is the RFP out of Vancouver going to be similar to the one from Nanaimo?
Vancouver's already issued their RFP for operators, so I'm going to use their template, and also we did a debrief with those who responded, and we want to incorporate what they said was deficient in the RFP to make the one in Nanaimo more robust and really get to what we need in Nanaimo.
Thanks for that. Does anybody else have any questions? It's an unusual, oh, Jason, go ahead.
Not a question, just great work by all those that were involved in bringing this to the community. I wasn't quite like the morning after the ghost, but I was very, very pleasantly surprised that it came to an end. So great work by everybody involved.
Dave, you're in a unique situation of having to tell us about something we're already getting.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, thank you for that, and that was again for information. We're on to other business, and this is specifically regarding the letter dated from Dr. Bonnie Henry regarding Provincial Health Officer regarding homeless encampments, health issue guidelines, and the context of COVID-19. We don't particularly have any of these encampments in our city, but I'm wondering from the folks at BC Housing and also Island Health is in the event that we were, would these recommendations of Dr. Turner be ones that we should be setting them up by?
So this is Heidi, and sorry, I've got to jump at 4:30 for another call, but definitely they are guidelines, and but you know, when we've had other sites around the province and on the island, we've done our best to be able to incorporate them, recognizing every community is very different, and that we have to work with what is available in that community.
Do you have anything to add, Lisa?
Yeah, I think the guidelines would be a good place to start. It really depends on the kind of numbers of people in a site in terms of the level of support required. I think it's in a site where everyone has agreed on the guidelines, it's much easier to provide service. It's much more straightforward, maybe not easier, but much more straightforward.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was...
It's sanctioned and there's rules around it almost, which structure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did anybody have anything else to add on that? Sure, go ahead. Inspector Fletcher.
Through the chair?
Yes.
It's Lisa Fletcher speaking. In terms of moving forward, one of the challenges is going to be the complexity of the individuals that we have within Nanaimo that would be considered for this type of arrangement. We've looked at some of the other locations that have gone this route, and their clientele is a little bit more, I don't know what word I'm looking for, more likely to follow some of the guidelines than what we have seen with some of the potential individuals that we would consider for this. We know that we've had some of these people try other housing facilities. So we definitely need something. I'm not trying to be a naysayer on this. It's just, if we're considering options, we really need to have a lot of support and wraparound and infrastructure in place, if that makes sense.
Okay, thanks. I think I can bring that back to council as a verbal update. Sure, okay. So I don't think we need to vote on anything particularly unless, nope, good. That leads us to the end of our meeting, which has never happened before. We're done at 4:30. I'm feeling a bit bad that we took a piece out of the agenda. Go ahead, Lisa.
There's one thing we have to look at. We looked at extending the meetings into October, and Dr. Turner has I think some meetings in November. So we have to look at our timing. Sky,
Yes.
you pointed that out. Thank you very much. So I guess it would be up to us to make a recommendation to council. Do we need to, I guess, Alina, it comes down to where we are at with timing for the final results.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. And we chatted about this at the working group, and it's primarily to accommodate the validation labs that are underway. So I don't want us to, say we want to hear from community, and then community mobilizes, and then we say, sorry, our timeline is done. So we chatted about extending the task force into November, just to make sure that it gives us enough time to hear from all the validation labs going on right now. And now that there's this motion and the exploration of this transition approach and this new arm's length, potentially, there might be value add from that perspective as well.
So with that in mind, the discussion for you as the chairs in the group is whether we just ask for the buffer but still aim to try and October. Preemptively ask council for that extension. I don't know if Ms. Lindsay has any thoughts on that.
Just a motion from this group asking for an extension for
Yeah.
the council.
Yeah. If we did that now, we're creating that buffer.
So we have a motion to extend our meetings until end of November?
Yep, I think the end of November would be appropriate.
So I have a motion on the floor to extend our meetings until the end of November. I'm sure everybody's tickled pink about that. And I'm looking for a seconder. Thanks, Kim. All those in favor say aye or raise your hands. I'm sure there's nobody who wants to debate it. Thank you. How's that for Robert's rules? We're nearing the end here, and I would just ask Dr. Turner, is there anything you need more from us? And I'm kind of like pointing out Island Health here and BC Housing, although Heidi's not here anymore. But any input that Lisa, you want to have on or recommendations for Dr. Turner, I would invite you to make sure she hears about them. You're a partner with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the question, circling back, is with the motion that was passed around the arm's length, it's the conversations with the statutory and public bodies around their role in implementation. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Do we, when and how do we want to go about that? Now that you have the motion approved, perhaps it's something that we can circle back through the working group to figure out the right strategies. And in the meantime, it's for sure, Lisa, if there's opportunities or suggestions you have about how we might navigate and who we should be talking to as we start putting the wheels in motion around implementation, we'll definitely lean on you as our conduit to health and then Heidi for BC Housing to that end. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. Anybody else want anything? We've got 26 minutes. Time for dinner. Okay, I'm going to call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Hammond, seconded by Signe. All those in favor? And thank you, everybody. We got a lot of great work done today. I'm very tickled pink. Thanks. Okay, put that in the minutes. Okay, thanks. Night all.